I want to welcome everybody to today's Smith in the World panel, and thank you so much for joining us today. I am Debra Immergut. I'm the Arts, Media, and Communications Career Specialist at the Lazarus Center here at Smith. And this is the sixth panel of the 2025 Smith in the World Conference Series. Our next and final panel will focus on health professions, and that's happening this Thursday, January 23rd at 4:30 p.m. ET. And all of the panels are being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. The Smith in the World Conference celebrates students' off-campus experiential learning, including internships, community service, research, and study abroad. The conference is part of the college's spring showcases, and you can learn more about that at a link that Emily will post in the chat. So today we will hear from 4 truly outstanding arts, media, and communications students. They will give short presentations about their off-campus learning in 2024 and talk about their projects and about the profound impact that their summer experiences had on them. I am honored to introduce our panelists. First, we'll have Aubree Wright, who will tell us about working at a music festival in Italy. Then Maya Barrientos, who is joining us from London and will give us an inside look at literary publishing. Next, Ruby Goldstein, who worked in the studios of 2 acclaimed visual artists in New York City. And then Talia Blanchard, who contributed to a fascinating documentary film production. This session will be recorded, so we ask that you please stay muted and please do put questions in the chat. We will love to answer them at the end of the last presentation. Okay, so with that, I am going to hand it off to our first panelist, Aubree Wright.
Hello, sharing my screen. Awesome. Okay, so I'm Aubree, you might have heard, and I'm going to talk to you about my summer working at a music festival in Florence, Italy, and the way that impacted my language immersion and general life. So a little about me. My name is Aubree Wright again. I'm from Chickasha, Oklahoma, originally in the middle of nowhere. I'm the class of 2025, so I'm currently a senior, and I'm an education and Italian double major. What you won't see in this information is that I'm very, very passionate about music and graphic design, both of which are things that I've worked in. At Smith, I'm a Smith Arts publicity intern, as well as I'm in the Celtic Music Ensemble, the Wind Ensemble, and then an ensemble at Hampshire as well. So I did the Smith and Florence program for the full academic year. Then I was awarded the Anita Volsveen Scholarship to spend an additional summer before or after my time. And I decided to do it after, when I would be more comfortable and have more opportunities to find an internship that really fit me. So in the process of that, I had to find something that was a minimum of 25 hours a week for the scholarship, something that utilized and furthered whatever skills I have, which are, not nothing, something that was connected to my future goals, whether that be in language and linguistics or in music, and something that was interesting for me because I didn't want to spend a summer doing things that I wasn't interested in. So I cold called a variety of different companies and organizations asking, hey, can I work for you for free for this many weeks, for this many hours? And I actually got quite a few responses. And so I was able to pick the thing that fit me the best. And that was at the Flore Festival, which stands for Flourishing Regenerations in English, notably. And this is a classical music festival that happens every summer in venues all around Florence, like this one, which is Palazzo Medici Riccardi, which is an older Medici palace. We had quite a few concerts there, and it was really amazing to hear Star Wars performed by a saxophone quartet in just a genuinely Baroque castle. Didn't expect that to happen in my life, and these are a few of our performers as well that were just absolutely amazing. So I started working with them pretty much the day after that I sent that email. And I had a couple different responsibilities, none of which were taking pictures of myself working. So this is the only image that exists of me actually on the job. So there you go, blurry Aubree. The main thing I spent most of my time doing was publicity photography. I took hundreds, if not thousands, of photos of our performers, which was obviously helpful for promoting the festival itself, but also for some of these performers because we had a whole section of concerts about our about up and coming artists in the area and high quality photos and publicity from a specific thing they were invited to attend can be really valuable for their own publicity and things along those lines. So it was really rewarding to see them use the pictures that I had taken later on. I also did a lot of outreach, which goes hand in hand with the publicity. I wandered the streets with pamphlets and got to approach strangers and use an audacity that I didn't know I had. And I said, hey, there's a concert happening tonight right over here in this palace. It costs this much. We'd love to see you. This is what it's about. And I got to do it in a bunch of languages I don't speak, but somehow figured out how to communicate in, which was really valuable to my general understanding of language. And I just talked to all sorts of people, which was really awesome to do, and just to really see the community and see how many people are very interested in music impulsively. I talked to Italians that had not gone to dinner yet. And then I talked to Americans who had gone to dinner 2 hours ago and didn't know what to do with their evening. And it was just a really exciting experience to just walk up to strangers and start talking. I did, as I've said, a lot of translation, and that goes beyond the outreach program, but also to work with my coworkers. We did open talks, which were 99% in Italian, but occasionally there would be questions where they're like, oh, but in America, how's this work? And I would be able to kind of bridge that gap culturally. And we all got to practice our language. They love practicing English. I love practicing Italian. And so we got to work together to really learn about it together. And that was really awesome to do. Unfortunately, I couldn't translate anything for this little gal who was my favorite guest who came to a multitude of concerts and just sat very quietly and listened. And I wanted to ask her questions, but she couldn't answer. Setup and coordination were also really important because we're in these palaces. We have to have a certain level of respect for the space we're in, but we also have to optimize it for our performers, acoustics, comfort, all of those things. This is in Museo Stubert, which is kind of outside of town. And we had this relatively famous pianist in a very niche group who was performing and had particular ideas about where he wanted to be in the space and things like that. So it was really about accommodating everyone as much as possible and a lot of physical labor. The most challenging one was at this concert, which is at Museo Novecento, which is a modern art museum. And they had this fantastic and interesting installation dead set in the middle of the courtyard. And our performer at the last minute said that the air conditioner was too strong inside and we have to do it outside. And we said, all right, we'll figure it out. And it took a lot of scheming and trying to figure out where to put these heavy chairs. And we ended up going with something along these lines, where we split everybody up and did almost a surround sound by the time everybody was there to watch. We filled all of these little platforms around, and that was really exciting to see how excited people were to just listen to this guy with the guitar. It was fantastic. So in the future and now at Smith, I've kind of brought all of these things together. I've kept a hold of that audacity that let me just cold call people because I never would have done that 3 years ago. And that's led me to doing things like going to a linguistics conference where I wasn't necessarily confident in the field, but was excited about it and willing to learn about it and ended up having a fantastic weekend. And I'm actually planning to, since going to this, planning to apply for PhD and master's programs in linguistics, having had that experience. I've also continued my music work here at Smith, and I still work in the Smith Arts publicity office. So I am dutifully taking photos in every rehearsal, even when I should be playing. And so it's always been really exciting and really thrilling to be a part of. And I hope to take all of these things that I learned, whether that's the language or that audacity. Again, I know our motto used to have audacity in it, but I think it's still something to hold really close and to just commit to doing whatever can help you later on and just having at it whenever you can. Yeah. And that's me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aubree. And yes, hang on to that audacity. I know you will. All right. Next, we have Maya Barrientos.
Hi, I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Maya. I'm from San Jose, California, and I'm a junior studying English language and literature and concentrating in poetry at Smith. And today I'm going to be talking about my summer 2024 remote internship experience at a small independent publishing press called Kelsey Street Press. So Kelsey Street Press is a small independent press that originated in Berkeley that aims to publish experimental feminist poetry. And they're very committed to uplifting underrepresented voices in literature, especially in poetry. And what interested me about the press was their commitment to offering the opportunity to diverse writers to publish their work and their emphasized value in publishing more so than profit. So when I was searching for opportunities, I Googled a lot of presses that were local to where I live in the Bay Area. So by doing this, I found many smaller independent presses with their own niches and their own values. And I cold emailed these, including the ones at the top of the slide, asking if they provided opportunities for unpaid internships, while mentioning my own background, such as my year, what and where I study, the Smith praxis, and my hopes and goals for a potential opportunity. But it also wasn't uncommon to receive a no or simply no response. And I think that my advice for students who want to reach out to places but might be hesitant would be to just do it because you're not really losing anything from it, and you shouldn't be discouraged by a potential rejection or a lack of response because you never know who might actually end up reaching out to you. And I think there's always places that are especially smaller that would love help on their team, especially those local to you. So before emailing them, I did try to familiarize myself with their catalog and their mission just to have some background knowledge on what I wanted to get into. And so this is what I did for Kelsey Street Press. This was my initial email in response to when they got back to me asking for more information about myself. And I then had a Zoom meeting with a couple of the press members for a casual interview and for them to get to know me some more and ultimately offer me an opportunity to intern for them. And I did use my Smith Praxis funding for this internship as well. So my responsibilities included various tasks that were assigned to me on a weekly basis, and a lot of it was flexible, independent work that would be reviewed in a weekly meeting with my supervisors. I had a lot of organizational tasks. I would write mock reviews for already published books by the press. For example, as you see on the screen, Dispossession, Deposition by Martha Reed, as well as other unpublished manuscripts to familiarize myself with the critiquing side of publishing that's pretty tied to book promotion. And some other responsibilities included book distribution tasks, feedback on manuscripts, and social media and publicity, which I'll get to shortly. So as for book distribution, I helped organize their catalog on a website called Asterism. And by working on this website, entering titles, authors, and dates, I got the chance to learn about each book the press has published and the respective authors. And I got to learn more about the process of book listings and distributions through this, which was super insightful. So as a part of my internship, I also received manuscripts to offer my comments and thoughts on as a way to familiarize myself with the editing aspect of the publishing process. I learned what type of feedback to give, how to provide the author questions, interpretations, and whatever, sought to understand the purposes and goals of the book being published. And one manuscript I reviewed was actually the winner of the press's QT BIPOC Prize, which is a free contest open to queer, trans, BIPOC writers to submit their manuscripts to. And this past year's winner was Jennifer Perrine for their book, Beautiful Outlaw, which I got to read through. I was also pretty involved in social media outreach, particularly by making posts for the press's Instagram pages for announcements and upcoming events. And I also contributed to developing a newsletter that goes out to all the press's subscribers, which detailed upcoming events, book launches, and other important announcements and information for the Kelsey Street Press community. I also got to learn more about the process of how a book is published and promoted through all of these responsibilities. and in particular for Kieran Bath's Instructions for Bono, which I had the chance to read the manuscript for and write a mock review. I got to promote her book tour online, and yeah, in general, it was cool to see how a book goes from being a manuscript to being put out into the world and reach the public like this one. So as for my takeaways, I definitely learned more about the general process and backends of independent book publishing. I learned more about how an independent press functions and operates day to day, and I experienced a good range of these aspects. I also built on my skills in publicity through the work that I did, and as well as my writing skills, and regularly engage with poetry by reading manuscripts, writing reviews, and discussing them. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to learn about the authors that the press has published and experimental feminist poetry, as it definitely inspired me as an aspiring writer myself. And I was really grateful to connect with the press members who were so willing to guide me and inspire me with their passion for publishing poetry from these diverse voices. So what I've learned from my experience at Kelsey Street Press has definitely been translated into the extracurriculars I do at Smith, such as the magazine I co-founded and co-edit, Crush, which is a literary and art magazine for students of color in the 5 college community to submit their work to. And so skills of reviewing, editing, organizing, and community building are all really essential to the magazine, and I've definitely learned and built upon those skills during my time at Kelsey Street Press. And just as a little plug, we recently published our latest print issue with lots of great work from students that you can check out digitally on our website, crushedmagazine.com. And yeah, in terms of my career, I'm definitely still interested in working in the world of literature after this, and I'm very open to exploring other avenues of literary industries as well. But it was really cool to work alongside people who are passionate about poetry and diversity in the publishing world, which I learned are really important values to me as well, and I want to carry those into my future career, whatever it may end up being. And yeah, thank you for being here to listen about my summer 2024 internship experience. If you're a student, feel free to reach out if you have any questions about applying or reaching out to presses and getting into publishing, and I'd be happy to talk with you. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maya. And I love hearing about your process for landing this internship and how you created your own opportunity. And Aubree, you did that as well. And that is super, super inspiring. And I hope, yeah, any student who's listening, it is, yeah, it's kind of intimidating, but it is so worth it. And you know, you really don't have anything to lose by sending an email. Okay, so now we are going to Ruby Goldstein.
All right. Hi, my name is Ruby Goldstein. I am the class of 2027. I am a history and visual arts double major on the painting track. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, and I spent summer of 2024 working as an assistant in the studios of 2 artists in New York. So I spent 3 days a week with the artist on the left, whose name is Danielle Tegeter. She is a multimedia artist, primarily a hard edge abstract acrylic painter. She's a professor at CUNY and half of Hilma's Ghost, which is a feminist art collective. She also has, I believe it's 2 pieces in MoMA's permanent collection. And I also spent 1 day a week with Alexi Worth, who's the artist on the right. He is a figurative painter and part-time art reviewer, and he often works with slightly unusual materials, such as airbrush, mesh surfaces, and other things of that nature, also silhouettes, like stencils, I mean. He is represented by DC Moore Gallery as a recipient of a Guggenheim Award, and Jerry Saltz said of him, quote, "Alexi Worth may be the best painter writer around right now." So pretty pretty big stuff. So I decided in September of 2023 that I was interested in what it would be like to work in an artist studio or in a gallery, because I'm very interested in like the living, breathing art world. Not so much the museum space, although that's awesome for everyone who is. I, as someone who makes art, I'm more interested in the art that's currently being made. So I started to ask around in September, but the people who I reached out to in the art department or at the Lazarus Center, through no fault of their own, were just not particularly helpful to me in this search, until I kind of randomly happened upon Debra at the Arts, Media, and Communications cohort lunch in February. And from there, I formed a relationship with her, and we met multiple times. And she actually reached out to Danielle and another artist who she knows personally on my behalf. And so that artist named Franklin Evans put me in touch with Alexi and another artist named Sharon Butler. And from there, it was kind of just a process of figuring out who was going to be in New York and how much help they might need, and what jobs I would be doing. And so in May, Franklin and Sharon decided that either they couldn't use the help or they wouldn't be in New York that summer. So they pulled out, and Danielle and Alexi decided that they would be happy to take me on. So they confirmed, and then I moved to New York a little bit less than a month later. So it really was a process. It took quite a while, but my God, was it worth it. So these are pictures of Danielle and Alexi's studios, both of which are in Brooklyn, although Danielle is actually at a residency at the PS1 studio in Manhattan, which is really exciting. So Danielle and Alexi's studios were pretty magical spaces. I mean, just every surface is overflowing with materials and sketches. That also required a lot of work to keep organized and running. So I spent many days doing, the grunt work, and that's totally fine. I was sorting through materials, I was sweeping, I was prepping canvases. I also did some administrative tasks like emailing and creating social media posts. That all sounds a little bit boring, but I can assure you that it was not, because on slightly more exciting days, I might use Alexi's airbrush to create stencils for him so that he can airbrush those shapes onto his work. I also sometimes helped Danielle title her paintings, and a couple of times I even posed for Alexi as a model, just for sketches, but it was pretty crazy to be drawn by a Guggenheim Award-winning artist. I mean, at the time, I joked with friends that if my life were a TV show, that they'd gotten new writers for this season, because it just seemed like all of the plots and the things that were happening around me had just gone off the rails in like the best possible way. There was one day where I had lunch with one person and dinner with 3 other artists, and between the 4 of them, 2 of them had pieces in MoMA's permanent collection, one of them had a piece in the Whitney's permanent collection, and 2 of them had won Guggenheim's. So it was pretty crazy stuff. Out of the studios, I spent, so you might have noticed that I only worked 4 days a week, 3 for Danielle and 1 for Alexi. So I took Fridays most of the time as my day to immerse myself in the art world. So I just saw every museum show that I could and every gallery show that I could. That was really not a world that I had been exposed to before the summer. And so Alexi, as a part-time art reviewer, would give me a list of shows that he thought were worth seeing. And then on Fridays, I would go and see them, and I would write up these little mock reviews. And then I would try to memorize them. So it seemed like I was just thinking of the really, really smart thing that I had to say about that show in the moment, but I had planned it out ahead of time. But we would discuss what we thought of the shows that we had seen. And it was a really great way of interacting with the work, and the degree to which our opinions overlapped definitely helped me grow my confidence as a viewer of art, not just as a maker. Also, as a hot tip for anyone who's thinking of living in New York, I recommend looking at getting cheap ballet tickets. Anyone under 30 can get them. And also, if you get a public library card, you can get super reduced museum tickets, which is just amazing. I mean, I just tried to see everything and everything that I could. So, as for takeaways and moving forward, I'd say that one of my major takeaways was that you just don't have to be scared of your job. Um, and that means a lot of things. I mean, for one, networking doesn't suck. It doesn't have to suck. It's a part of every job. I mean, it just means talking to people in your field. But if you find a field that you're really excited about, talking to the people in that field is really exciting. I mean, I just got to talk to so many people that I found interesting and whose work I really respected. That being said, I also was incredibly aware that I was the most green in every room that I was in. So I tried to stay pretty quiet and just listen and be a sponge. Um, I learned so much just from observing and absorbing information about how artists, the relationship between artists and galleries and artists and museums, and how you get work out there and how you get accepted into residencies and all that sort of thing just by listening. I also would say to just see everything that you can and talk to every person who's willing to talk to you, but also more importantly than that, listen to every person that is willing to talk to you. The summer also just helped me understand how big the world is, like the art world is. Um, for every gallery show I saw, there were probably 100 people that were employed just to put that together. There were gallerists and art administrators and secretaries and photographers and exhibition designers and art handlers and graphic designers and studio assistants and personal assistants. And I'm sure there's so many more jobs that I don't even know exist. And so, as someone who's getting both a degree in the arts and a degree in the humanities, I think it's really easy for us to feel discouraged. I mean, I talk to so many friends that just don't know what they'd like to do with their degree. And it's kind of a joke that it's not very employable. And I just don't think that that is true at all. It might be harder, but there are so many jobs out there in the field that people are getting paid to do and making connections. Even if you're an art handler and you want to be a professional artist, you are making connections by working that job that will pay off later down the road. And you are just learning things by being in those spaces and seeing the work that is getting made. And so I would say find a job or find someone you're excited about and get ambitious. Get in the rooms with those people and talk to them, because the most valuable thing you can gain from an experience like this is not any one piece of knowledge or a skill, but just having people available to you who will answer your questions and who you can ask advice of. For me, I asked a lot of practical advice questions and about how people got to where they are. And then I set those as goals for myself. So there are certain art programs in the summer for college students and things of that nature. Um, these people are just your best resource. So I was really excited to get out there and meet them. And if there are any people who are attending today who are also looking for, a foot into this world, I mean, it's just like it's hard to get in those rooms. So if I can help anyone who's interested in the art world, I have so much more to say about everything I did this summer. So feel free to reach out to me. My email is on screen. Yeah, and thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to Debra for helping me figure out these jobs and for putting all of this together.
Well, and thank you to you, Ruby, for being so eloquent about working in the arts, and you are singing my song. Absolutely. There are jobs out there, and networking doesn't suck. I like that. Okay. All right. Our last and certainly not least panelist is Talia Blanchard. Take it away, Talia.
Hi. All right. Let me get my presentation up. Great. All right. Are we seeing things okay? Yep. Great. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming so much and for waiting through my last presentation. My name is Talia Blanchard. I'm a senior at Smith College, and I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about my experience interning for a documentary filmmaker over the summer of 2024. So just a little more about me. I'm a film and media studies major, Jewish studies minor, and I'm part of the interdisciplinary making concentration, which is a rather new concentration at Smith. As I mentioned, I'm in my senior year, and my hometown is right outside of Tampa, Florida. So a bit of ways away from here. Growing up, I was very involved in all different sections of the arts, especially theater and photography. And getting to Smith, I loved my first few film and media studies classes and declared my major as soon as I could. I think it was that first spring semester, right at the beginning. And one of those first classes that really made me love film and media studies so much was a course called Popular Documentary. And that was my first real introduction to documentaries as something to study, to create, and to enjoy watching. I had actually never enjoyed watching documentaries before that class. I kind of thought they were something for like boring adults to watch war movies or something. So I really wasn't interested until that course, and that kind of set me on a path to be interested in documentary. Here we go. All right, so my search for an internship after my junior year was a little rocky. I was looking for anything in film, television, theater production, just broadly anything that could get my foot in the door into a creative industry and to gain some sort of experience. I wasn't too picky what. At school, I specifically do a lot of technical production, such as set design or art direction, but I was just looking for any form of the production process. I applied to a lot of larger production and entertainment companies and had very few responses, many ignored applications, and even more rejections. I was feeling pretty sad by the end of the semester until just as the semester was coming to a close. I was referred to an opportunity by a Lazarus Center staff member, where at the Lazarus Center I work as a peer advisor. In that night, I completed all of my materials, which was a resume, cover letter, and 2 writing samples. The next day, I had my interview, I completed it, and I was able to secure the opportunity. And there was actually a rocky moment where it seemed like I might not be able to do the internship because her funding for it was like my advisor or the head of the internship's funding looked like it was going to fall through. And I said, wait, we have praxis. So we altered the internship a little bit to make it work for Smith's praxis funding. And then I was able to once again get on board with the internship. All right, so to tell you guys a little bit about the organization I was working with and the advisor of my internship. So I was with Mind's Eye Productions, which is a documentary production company led by filmmaker Deirdre Fishel to support, and I was supporting the development of a new feature film. This film would be focused on the sexuality of women over 65 with the purpose of challenging societal notions of love and sexuality as we age. It'll also explore society's complicated views of aging and femininity, looking at different representations of this over time. Deirdre did a short film with a similar premise 20 years ago, and you can see on the left, it's called Still Doing It. And she wanted to revisit this topic in more depth with newfound life experience, both just in her personal life and as a filmmaker. So she brought me on as a development intern. And what did I do? Well, I was working remotely from my home in Tampa, and my tasks were evenly split between research development and finding characters or documentary casting. As I mentioned, I was remote. We were meeting once a week with my small team of the director and one other intern who is actually a film and media student at Mount Holyoke. And the interesting thing about independent work, it was a bit of a challenge at first to set up my own schedule and to build the confidence to ask my advisor questions when I had them, because since we only met once a week, if something came up that I didn't know how to do, I would have to either call her on the phone or send her a message. And that was not something that I was used to doing. So I had to build a lot of confidence into accepting when I didn't know how to do something. And I also had to be very, I had to work on keeping myself to a schedule and making sure I did not work from my bed all day. So part of or pretty much the main part of development research for this documentary was watching films and videos. And surprisingly, to make a film, you have to watch even more films. I watched lots of documentaries of similar subjects to see both who was funding them to give us an idea of possible funders for this film, and to see what types of conversations were happening on this subject. One example is Beyond 60. I also was looking at films and archival videos that engaged with the subject of sexuality and love for women over 65 in both positive and negative lights. And I developed a couple of write-ups on some of the main topics and main representations that were coming up. The one I ended up really sticking to was the representation of older women in films about witchcraft, because that was a personal interest of mine as someone who loves witches and horror. You can see I included Rosemary's Baby on here, which is a classic example of that stereotype if you haven't seen it before. And that ended up being a big piece of my research and something that the filmmaker was really interested in exploring further in her film, which she hadn't considered before. So it was exciting to really be a piece of that story making. I also, while I was looking for all of this, I was really looking for striking clips and photos that could be used for the film's sizzle reel, which is basically a reel that would be showed to potential funders to help find people to fund the film. So I also did casting, as I mentioned, and to search for characters for a documentary, which is just another word for those interview participants or expert participants, you have to do it in some more unusual ways, especially with a topic like this. And we were really looking for women with unique romantic and sexual experiences, and I had to do some outreach through unique avenues. Some examples, I went to Instagram, I went to singles Facebook groups, I went to adult social networking sites that I will not describe further, and I had a short-lived attempt on eHarmony until I quickly got kicked off the site. They knew that I was not an 85-year-old man named John or something. But anyways, this sort of organic, out-of-the-box way of searching for documentary participants is actually really important for something like this, because it helps ensure the diversity of experiences and makes it so more people hear about the project. And we get perspectives that are less visible in media, which is really what this project is all about. So some reflections I had on returning to campus. As I mentioned before, my work on campus is very different from this development and documentary work. Yet when I came back to campus, I felt an immediate change in the type of creative projects I was doing and in my workflow. better understanding pre-production and development has helped me get through my creative projects more effectively, and also made it so my finished product looks a lot more like what I initially envisioned. So all of that is to say that if you're interested in any form of creative work, whether that be film, technical theater, I would really recommend learning and taking time to learn about the development and the research side, even the financial side, because when you have an understanding about that, it really helps you speed up your whole process and just become a stronger creative person. Also, as I mentioned, I had to get out of my box to reach out to people. I had never done that type of cold messaging or cold calling before. And I knew I was doing it for a purpose that was really meaningful to me, which was to be able to capture these stories that are just not heard in our current media. And that was kind of what pushed me to be bold and get out of my shell. And it also reminded me that that's something that is important to bring to networking also, especially in an industry like film, where so much of it is about communicating with people and sharing your interests. And speaking of interests, in order to develop stories, it's so great to dive into your media interests, to stay updated with media trends, and to watch lots of films. It's crazy to me that a big piece of why I got this internship to begin with and why I flourished in it so much was not because of my technical film skills or even any other technical skill, but just because I was so enthusiastic about a certain genre of film, or I had been so excited to learn about certain topics or to watch certain media. And I think that's just sort of a good reminder that you don't have to shy away from telling your potential hiring managers or anyone about what really gets you excited, especially in the film world, because that's passion is what's going to drive you. And this was like hearing about a documentary about women over 65. I had no idea I would end up reading like archives from the Salem witch trials, but here I was reaching out to like Salem witch trial experts, and that was really me like dipping into a like passion that I had, and it was successful and it was helpful for the film. And yeah, I just think like not discounting those other interests and thinking about how you can bring all of your media interests in even when you think they don't connect. So my big takeaway is to watch lots of movies and learn all about filmmaking, film watching, and just, yeah, enjoy it, because you need to enjoy it to be able to want to make it at all. Yeah, and I know the film world can be scary, but I can talk to parts of it, at least the documentary side. And if anyone ever wants to talk to me about it, ask me more about this experience, ask about some of the things that I studied, I can tell you a lot about menopause. You can send me an email. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Talia. That was wonderful, informative. And we're not going to ask you any questions about those sites you went to.
I appreciate it.
But I will say that my takeaway from all of these presentations today is to be bold and audacious. And each of you was and are. And to put in a tiny plug for Arts, Media, and Communications Career Community, our first cohort lunch of the term is February 6th at lunchtime. It's a Thursday, and it's on Handshake, and you can register. And what do we do there? We get each other to be bold and audacious. We talk about how to do that from every angle, from networking to writing those cold emails to just like, bolstering our confidence in every way we can as creative people in the world. So please come if you're listening and these folks inspired you, because they're a great representation of what we do there. So, okay, We are opening up to questions right now. I have a couple of questions that I'm happy to throw out there, but I'd love to hear any questions, and I know the panelists would too. They can be to one panelist in particular or to all of them. So I'll give you a minute to think about those, and maybe I'll start us off with a question for all of you, and that is, I'm sure you had ideas about what literary publishing was like, what documentary film production was like, art and music promotion. So when you think back on it and you thought about like what it would be like to be in these fields and what people did in these fields, and then, what surprised you and what like changed your whole, or at least one part of your thinking about what these fields are really about or what it feels like to work in them. And I think I will go to Aubree since we haven't heard from you in a bit.
Yeah, it's a lot of things that I could talk about. I've done a lot of music publicity and things like that before, but it was really different because I've never done something that was so long term. And so it was really exciting to go from one event to the next event to the next every night for multiple weeks. And I really, going into it, I knew about music, I knew about the community, but I didn't know exactly what the vibe was in the Italian music community, especially in a place where it is very important and a lot of things started right there. So it was really cool to see the connections between what we were doing and where we were and how intense that was in a couple of places. And just being around people every night in this context really bonded everybody in a really awesome way, I think, too. That answers your question a little.
Okay. Ruby?
I would say that just seeing the business side of the art world was fascinating. I mean, being an art student and having taken a lot of arts classes in my life, you are only immersed in the creative process. You are not immersed in the professional side at all. And so understanding how artists balance their own personal aesthetics and creative impulses with how they think about the art market and how that affects their relationship with galleries and how galleries think of the artists that they represent and how that dynamic works. Also, just really basic information like the fact that galleries take a 50% cut of any art that they sell. That's pretty mind-blowing. 50. So like that kind of information, I think it's just something I didn't even know what questions I didn't have answered because I didn't know what questions to ask. But I think thinking about art not as a purely creative pursuit, but also if you're going to be making your living off of it also as, and it sounds a little bit terrible, but it shouldn't also, as a business, and thinking about what is selling and why people are attracted to it.
Okay, thanks. Talia or Maya, one of you want to jump in? Talia?
Yeah, I think one thing, and there's multiple things I could say on this, but the thing that I've kind of had to grapple with because I guess I do know it, but I've had to like accept it as truth from this internship is that the development process is so fluid and so about just coming up with ideas that you can do so much work and so much research, and then that could end up not being what goes into the finished product at all, or you could end up finding like a really great nugget of information that totally changes the track of where the project is going. And that can be both really exciting, but also sometimes frustrating if you are like, oh, but I've done all this research. I've spent weeks doing this. And I think I've had to sort of like think about it in my brain and be like, every single bit of research is important on the path to figuring out whatever that final piece is going to be. And not every bit of research is going to make it in there. And it's not a representation of like, oh, this research was bad or unnecessary, but it was all necessary to get you to like point B or whatever. So that was sort of that was something I had to adjust to. And then also the way that you think about people in a documentary was a change for me, because as much as and we know that documentaries are both to varying degrees a reflection of real life and constructed to a certain degree. And when it comes to casting and thinking about people as characters versus participants, getting used to that language and getting used to how you kind of like sift through who you want in a documentary versus who you don't, and that sort of like all of that sort of business side is it's just not something you think about when you watch a documentary. You're just thinking like, oh, the life of these people. You're not thinking about all of the work that got into either choose those people and not choose someone else, or specifically seek out people who are widowed and like XYZ. So both of those things, just getting used to how much documentaries like a narrative film are constructed to tell a story like any other film was interesting. And it doesn't make them bad or necessarily less truthful, but everyone's sort of trying to tell a story or get a point across. And if you're interested in working in documentary, I think it's an important thing to know before going into it.
Okay, great. Thanks. Maya?
Yeah, there were a few things that I guess surprised me during my time at Kelsey Street Press. I think one of them was that I didn't expect there would be much of a writing aspect to it with the reviews, which I don't know if it was unique to just my internship, but I think it was really helpful in kind of showing how like book distributors and booksellers how they decide to pick up books, and kind of being involved in that, or not involved, but kind of seeing what that's like and trying to promote a book through a review was really interesting. And also just background things like the back ends of book publishing I didn't really know about, like with distribution. The press was like undergoing this a switch in distribution companies because their previous one had shut down, and so there was that whole situation. And it kind of just made me realize how difficult it is to maintain a press, especially smaller independent one that's run by volunteers basically, and how much work and effort goes into it, especially into a press that's trying to promote diversity, which is not really super common in like in bigger um with bigger presses. So yeah, that was really interesting to see.
Okay. Yeah, and I know you are experiencing that, some of those challenges and rewards in your own publishing venture. And I will do another plug for Crushed magazine, which Maya founded with a fellow student. It's awesome. Okay, I have one. What do you think, Emily? One last question? Yes? Okay, it's a quickie. We'll do a quick round. It's about skills. Thinking back, what is one skill that you were happy that you had during your summer working in this internship? And what is one skill that you wished you had developed a little bit more? And hopefully this will be helpful for any students or prospective students who are listening and thinking about their upcoming summer and what they might do to get ready. So a skill that you are glad you had, and a skill maybe that you wished you'd had more of. Okay. Who feels ready with an answer? Just give me a little wave. Oh, I'm coming out of the blue on this one. Aubree, go for it.
I'll just always go first. And I don't mind, so it's okay. I mean, you know, kind of beating the same dead horse, but the language thing was both very valuable and terrifying. I was so glad I had done this internship after the full year there, of like the full academic year, because I'd had all that time to get used to it. But at the same time, I don't want to say I came in a little too confident in my language, but there were times where I was like, oh, I can handle this. I know this vocab, and I absolutely did not. Um, so it was really one of those, you got to keep a little bit of humility type of situations. But I was really glad for all of the prep I had language wise before then. And then in the moment, I was really, I almost had wished I'd learn a couple other languages just to top it off. But just, I gained more of a willingness to just really desperately try to communicate with people who I don't share language with. And that was just really scary and also awesome when it worked out. And I think it's made me a little bit braver in talking to anyone about anything, anywhere.
Okay, great. Who else has skill thoughts? Ruby?
I would say for skills, I was really glad to have like the technical art skills, like that I knew how to prep a canvas going in, that I knew how to like properly organize an art space, how to package work, basically. That kind of thing was super helpful. Also writing skills, because, and I talked to so many artists about this, they say that people coming out of art schools and not liberal arts colleges are just suffering in terms of like writing quality. It's not a skill that they're taught. And so that's a real plus in your job, is having that. I would say in terms of skills that I would encourage other people to um pursue before they think about this kind of thing, and it is really a skill, is admitting when you don't know something. That's really hard to do when you're in these spaces where like everyone knows who this artist is, everyone knows how to do this thing, and you don't want to be that one person who's like, "Oh, I'm stupid, I guess." You're not. You're new. No one is born knowing this stuff. That's totally fine. It's hard to do, and it is a skill, admitting that you don't know things. And there are plenty of people that are terrible at that skill, but they suffer for it, because then there are so many things that they actually don't end up learning. So just admit when you don't know someone's name, like when you don't know this person in your field, just ask who they are. That's fine.
Okay, fantastic advice. Maya, how about you? Thoughts about skills?
Yeah, I think that something useful was, especially for when reviewing manuscripts, was my background in like in creative writing workshops was really helpful in just kind of already knowing what kind of feedback to give. Because I would do that a lot. I mean, all workshops, creative writing workshops, I would have to, review my peers' work and offer my own comments and thoughts or suggestions or whatever. And so I think that really helped in that aspect. But I think a skill that I maybe would have been helpful to have a little more developed would maybe just be like patience with reading and familiarizing yourself with, well, I mean, in this case, like experimental poetry, um, which I wasn't super familiar with. I mean, I've read a lot of poetry, but just not the type that that press was publishing. So I think just having patience with yourself and like allowing yourself to just read slowly, and so you can offer the most valuable comments or suggestions or thoughts, is really helpful. Um, yeah.
Okay. Patience with yourself is definitely important when you're going into these new situations, for sure. All right, Talia.
Yeah, the skill that was really helpful was just knowing how to research for things online, like articles, people, videos. Don't skip that day if you have it in one of your classes. Go talk to a specialist at Nielsen. Like I'm pretty sure there's like library specialists for helping you with research for projects and papers. Like I really recommend doing that. It was super helpful for this specific internship. And then the skill I felt like I wish I had brought originally was probably, I totally forgot as soon as I started talking. Um, I guess the the same thing of knowing, of like just saying when I don't know something. Um, and also being patient when I can't find something immediately, and not just like being patient with the process and how long the process takes. Because especially with an internship, you've you usually have an extended period of time, and you can also be honest with your whoever is advising you about how you've been finding things, and if you aren't finding things, like just being honest about if you're having trouble finding things and where you're looking, because sometimes I would search for hours and nothing would show up, and that would be discouraging sometimes. So it really is just patience.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights, all of you. I'm really inspired. I'm sure a lot of people here in this room are. And really, every single one of you did a fabulous, wonderful job. Okay, so this concludes our Smith in the World panel today. Thank you to the panelists and also to our great audience. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today. And we encourage you to visit our last panel on Thursday for health professions. So, and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Thank you.